Morning, everybody. It's Carpo. Now, I had a couple people ask me why I buy into the theory of the electric universe. So I wanted to kind of lay this out, this groundwork, so I can kind of explain my position a little better. Not to convince anyone of anything. Actually, I'm on my own path in this world, and my searching in my life has taken me down many paths, but the only things of ancient history that I'm really interested in learning about, at least the things that really moved me, are understanding where our myths and legends came from. And I'm very into mythology and ancient history. Before, modern ancient history, I don't consider the Romans, I'm talking way before that. My question has always been, where did all these symbols, ideas, allegories, and archetypes come from? And why are they so consistent throughout history? And before they were in the comedies and the legends and all the stories of written history, where did they come from before that? Because everything was orally passed down before we had language. So my guess was that the ancients, when they finally developed language and started writing, many different cultures had similar ideas, similar legends, similar stories that they were able to share. And at that time, we know people were able to travel the planet, on boats a couple thousand years ago, but it doesn't mean that we were really able to penetrate the heartland of any one continent and really understand what each culture believed. In other words, we may be able to exchange ideas from different places, but no European ever trudged to the heartland of America to find out what a particular Native American tribe was writing about. What they were believing, or what they were carving, painting, whatever they do. Totem poles, all this. So the electric universe theory is just like another theory to me that just kind of passes by. I analyze it and I see how it feels. This is all we can do with ancient history, is see what resonates with us. And this particular theory resonated with me. And so in the last year or so, I've been interested in Thunderbolt's project and subscribed to it. I don't talk about it much because, it's science. The science of this whole idea between electric universe has so much opposition and so many supporters at the same time who are just at each other's throats trying to say, you're wrong, you're wrong. I'm not trying to find the right in society's eyes. I'm trying to understand things that feel right with me, because I know that ancient history before written language is something that we'll only be able to speculate on. In the Thunderbolts movie and in the other one they made, there was some interesting explanations of how plasma creates certain patterns in the laboratory, and how they've only recently been able to understand how these plasma forms these designs, but they're very similar to the rock men that were carved, very similar to some of the designs that have been painted and carved throughout history. And for those who know of the theory, it's basically that in order for an entire world to all come up with very similar stories, in my mind, there would only be one place that we could all see the same thing, and that would be in the night sky. So it is my belief that something did happen. Within the last 20,000 years, it's obvious we've had some celestial events. And it would only lead the ancients to believe that that would be the gods. And perhaps at one time in ancient history, the planets really were considered the gods. Then, fast forward to, maybe 1,000, 2,000 BC, where they started taking these ideas and really twisting them into these old word of mouth, passed down, these legends, and put them into a written format, which they would call the Bible, or whichever particular document it may be, and try to put it into a human understandable form, and anthropomorphize those planets, and create new stories based on old ideas. This is nothing new. This is exactly what the Christian church did to Christmas from Saturnalia. So it would only lead me to believe that Saturnalia was perhaps created from some word-of-mouth legend about perhaps the planet Saturn. Perhaps it could be a symbol. These are open ideas, and nobody really has the answers to them. So I decided to open books and start doing my own research. Now, I've watched all the documentaries and videos about, ancient history and where we come from, but they're all just documentaries. And in order for us to do any type of real research, we have to open our books and open our minds and start looking at pictures, looking at research. Cast out the research that's been done that's been proven wrong, and know what that is ahead of time so we can move forward. Anything that has validity always gets a lot of steam at the beginning, and it also gets a lot of animosity towards it. The most ridiculed ideas are often the ones that end up being ridiculed only because they're out of the main paradigm of thinking. And over time, most scientific theories that are ridiculed, or I should say all scientific theories that are approved, were ridiculed at first. All theories at first are just a theory. So I opened up my mythology book. I started looking through pictures of Horus and pictures of the all Egyptian mythology, Chinese mythology, Nordic, on down the line. And I started finding many, many, many connections and pictures I hadn't seen before. Babylonian carvings, very, very similar to the ones that I've seen on the shows, to allow me to confirm that no, it's not just one person compiling a bunch of similar photos and saying, look, it must be this, but this is something that really occurs throughout all cultures. It's one of the most fascinating points to this that has, for me, has always been why were so many cultures obsessed with things like, halos and the wheel and pillars. All of this can be understood through plasma and electrical discharge, because it's really one of the only explanations as to why the sky would show these things. And that's just my opinion on it. I don't expect, this isn't something that I can prove or that I want to prove. This is something I'm doing for my own interests. But I'd like to share it with people if I find anything conclusive. I've been going through some pictures and through my mythology guide. It's a very detailed illustrated guide. And, I just keep finding new connections. I imagine down the road maybe I would, compile it and try to make an interesting theoretical documentary out of it or something down the road, but I probably won't, only because there are too many people doing that already, and what good is one more person's opinion? I don't have the time to do the deep research 24 hours a day like some people do. And I'm very fortunate that I don't, because when you put your head too far into the barrel, you'll fall in sometimes. And we have to keep ourselves distanced from our opinions and our emotions, in these issues. A lot of people might ask, why is this important? Who cares about ancient history? Another person might say, well, that's obvious, history repeats itself, we have to learn from the past so we don't make the same mistakes. That's not why I'm learning history. I've already learned modern history enough to see the mistakes and the patterns that we've made through religious, social, cultural, political, all our different views. And I've made my own conclusion as to how that works, and whether we can improve society through different thinking, or whether we need to all be. I have my own opinions on all of that. But for the ancient history, I'm talking about predating any type of writing, predating the Sumerians. Let's talk about 10 to 20,000 BC, maybe 30,000 BC. Humans were finally starting to socialize, and coming out of their caves, if you will. I don't know the details of every, 1,000 years and where people were at any particular time. But all I know is that 30,000 years ago, we had no written language as far as we know. So anything that would have happened would have been passed down generation to generation and would have been carved in the rocks for those to see. Now I'm going to tell you, I'm just going to leave you with this. One of the things that's always disturbed me, and this is why this resonates, the electric universe theory and the theory that there were, discharges in the sky and major events. The reason why this makes so much sense to me is because there's one thing that's always bugged me. Every time I've looked at ancient rock art or carvings or anything with rays or anything coming out of it, it's always distorted. Not always, but very often it's distorted, such as it may be a wheel with some spokes longer, or perhaps a few are closer together than the other ones. Perhaps there's some strange thing coming off the top of a symbol that shouldn't be there, and you're saying, what does this mean, Where do these curls and these swoops and this particular shape come from? And you look and you look and you look through nature. You look to see what examples nature provides for this, and there's nothing. There's nothing out there that can explain why this was so important to people and why a person would spend so long carving or painting something in order just to make it off-center or oblong on one edge. And when you understand the way that the plasma works in the laboratory, I can't explain it here. You know, you'd have to check out the Thunderbolts project and see what they have to say. I'm not one of those people that's just buying into it because it's like, oh yeah, that must be right. I don't do that with science. And I've been interested in electric universe theory for about a year now, and I haven't talked about it because, you know, I subscribe to suspicious observers. I like watching the sun connection. I believe that the planets and the sun are connected to our psyche, to our emotions, that astrology and astrotheology have actual credence and roots that are valid. I don't understand how they work, but the ancients were much more aware of these things, and that's because they constantly lived with it. They weren't distracted by all the things that we have. And it doesn't mean that they were, you know, smarter, but it sure seems that way. You know, the ancient Chinese observatories, which were these giant, there's one where it's hold on. He wants his headband stuff. He's awake. Anyway, I'll leave it with that. It's a fascinating theory, and I urge people to look into it. And I'm not saying that it's right or wrong, or that, you know, I'm not going to be one of those guys that sits here and says, this must be true, and this is right, and this is the only theory that's valid. I'm just going to say that it resonates with me. So, peace and love.